Hello, bruvs. We're back with The Beautiful Side of Evil by Johanna Michaelsen. I believe it's a 1982 book about her foray into the occult and then eventually becoming some kind of minister. I'm not sure exactly what she became. Anyway, here we go. Chapter 11. Let me get this going. Chapter 11, Signs and Wonders. I can't get it. Signs and Wonders. To say that Papa was concerned about the turn of events in my life would be an understatement. He was pleased at the positive changes he sensed in my attitude. The depression I had been in for almost a year was gone. I had a new sense of worth and purpose. For the first time in my life, I felt needed. I belonged, but Daddy couldn't know the depth of those feelings. All he could see was his much loved daughter committing herself full steam to working with a very strange old woman whose activities were not only weird by all reports, but unsanctioned by the government. Well, what if she's raided while you're there? You could wind up in jail. What if someone dies on her? What if you catch some horrible disease from handling those people? What if something happens to you on the road or in that awful neighborhood? You're not getting home till after 1 in the morning. I loved him for his concern, but knew I was protected. Nothing would happen to me. I could sense a special force field all around me. I learned to emanate a cocoon of energy which kept all intruders out. Many times in the subway or on the bus, I would see someone leer at me and begin to approach. Invariably, he would stop about 3 feet from me as though he had hit an invisible wall and back away. Looking confused, my assurances did little to convince Daddy, and he decided to drive me into Pachitas whenever he could. After his initial fiasco with Hermanitos, however, he refused to come inside, preferring to go see a movie until I was through. It was not until Hermanito and Dr. Carlos prescribed some strange medicines for me that Daddy decided to go check things out again before allowing me to swallow any of the murky brew given me. Daddy and Dr. Carlos liked each other on sight, which was fortunate as Daddy proceeded to corner the doctor and hit him with all the questions and doubts he had concerning Pachita and Hermanito. I am a doctor, Don Alberto, and a surgeon. I have my own practice. Do you think I would risk everything for something I knew was a fraud or somehow dangerous? Do you think I would stay here and risk a charge of manslaughter or worse, murder? Not once in all the years Pachita has been doing these things has anyone ever died on her table, or as a result, oh man, of complications from her operations, nor has anyone assisting her caught any disease. It is true, not all on whom she operates recover their health. Some die despite Hermanito's efforts, but God is sovereign, and Hermanito can only do what God allows. Dr. Carlos put his hand on Papa's shoulder. I have been here many months now, Don Alberto. Hermanito has honored me greatly, and I am one of his main assistants at the operations. I have seen wonderful things here, miracles. He performs wonders far beyond what medical science can accomplish. My colleagues would say I was lying or out of my mind if I told them what I have seen. They would protest, saying what Hermanito does is physically impossible. They are right, but God is much greater. Don Alberto, much greater. I have seen with my own eyes the operations Hermanito performs. They are from God. But stay tonight, Don Alberto. You will see for yourself. There were 6 operations scheduled for that night. 4 were minor ones in which a special liquid was injected into the base of the spine. Right. Hermanito's preliminary treatment for most paralytics. The procedure took only 5 or 6 minutes. The next operation was on a young man in his mid-20s named Araldo. His mother, Marina, a lovely, very elegant lady from a wealthy family, was assisting along with the doctor. It was she who had brought Dr. Carlos to Pachitas after her own husband had been successfully treated there. Geraldo had been in an accident several years before, in which his nose had been badly broken. Surgeons had reconstructed it, but a piece of crushed bone was lodged at the base of his nose. Pressing into his skull, because of the location, the surgeons had been reluctant to remove it despite the fact that it constantly impaired his breathing and occasionally caused severe headaches. Daddy and I moved to the foot of the cot to watch. Geraldo stretched out a sheet as his mother wiped off Hermanito's scissors with a cotton soaked in balsam and handed them to him. Elevate your thoughts to God, dearest brothers, Hermanito said as he raised the scissors towards the altar. Then he turned to Geraldo and pushed the point of the scissors into his forehead to the right, just above the nose. He made an opening in the skin. The sound of flesh being snipped was clearly audible. Then he took his knife and firmly shoved it into the wound, pounding it through the skull with the heel of his hand. We could hear the bone crushing under the blows. Geraldo groaned. Do you feel pain, my son? Hermanito asked. Yes, a little, Hermanito. Marina reached out to touch her son's head. Don't you worry, we're almost through. Hermanito reached for a piece of cotton, leaving the knife clearly sticking in Geraldo's forehead. As he did so, he soaked up some blood that had accumulated in the wound around the knife. He then resumed scraping inside the head for several minutes, complaining about the difficult location of the fragments, which he kept digging out and removing. Periodically, Hermanito would discuss with Dr. Carlos, who stood at his left as the main assistant, what he was doing. Do you see here, beloved son, how these fragments have lodged themselves? The doctor responded affirmatively. This is wonderful, Hermanito, he said quietly as he bent over the boy. It would have taken me almost an hour just to go through the bone. You have done it in minutes. That is a very delicate area close to the optic nerves. He could lose his sight if they were damaged. Truly, God is good. After 20 minutes or so, the operation was over. There, my son, how do you feel now? Hermanito asked gently. Fine, Hermanito. I can breathe perfectly out of the right side now, but the left is still the same, he answered. Yes, I know, my son. In 10 days, when you are stronger, we will operate on your left side. We saw Geraldo a week later when he was in for a checkup. He told us the symptoms on the right side of his nose were gone. There was no question in his mind that Hermanito had cut through his head. He had felt pain and intense pressure inside his head during the operation and could hear and feel the bone crunching and being scraped. Several days after his operation, he had gone to his doctor, who stared in disbelief at the new x rays. The obstruction on the right side of Araldo's nose had indeed vanished. After Geraldo was bandaged and carried out to the other side of the house to rest for an hour, Dr. Carlos spread a clean sheet on the cot and proceeded to remove his shirt. What, Carlos? My father exclaimed. Are you going to have an operation? Yes, certainly, said the doctor. I have developed a hernia that needs to be closed. Hermanito is going to take care of it for me now. Hermanito smiled and patted the doctor's arm. Come, Don Alberto, you stand here beside me and watch. Daddy walked around Hermanito and stood by the doctor as he stretched out on the cot. As always, Hermanito rubbed the area to be operated with a cotton soaked in alcohol. The knife and scissors had been cleaned with the balsam and were ready for use. As Hermanito made the cut into the abdomen, the doctor, whose head was raised on a pillow so he could observe the procedure, began describing in medical terms what was taking place. He could see and feel everything Hermanito was doing. Once the hernia had been reached, Hermanito asked Marina for a needle and thread. She was not prepared for the request, and it was several minutes before a needle and spool could be located. I watched Hermanito, eyes shut, thread the needle in one try, and then proceed to stitch up the doctor's hernia, a process the doctor compared with his own technique in similar operations. Daddy was awed. He had gone fully expecting and looking to detect fraud on one level or another, and instead had witnessed at point blank, two amazing operations, each verified by a practicing surgeon. Dr. Carlos wasn't the only surgeon convinced of the reality of the phenomena that took place at Pachita's. Early in March of 1972, Dr. E. Stanton Maxey, MD, FACS, was at Pachita's hoping to obtain a healing for one of his terminally diseased patients. Dr. Maxey later wrote an article entitled The Surgeon's Observation on Psychic Surgery, in which he discusses his encounter with Pachita as well as with several psychic surgeons of the Philippines. The following account is based on excerpts taken directly from that article. In November 1971, I operated upon GW and removed 18 pounds of tumor, which was solid cancer, adenocarcinoma of the ovaries. There was spread there was spread of the tumor to adjacent organs which could not be removed. Conventional chemotherapy was undertaken, but the remaining cancer grew. Obviously, if the patient were to survive, a miracle cure was needed. In March, I accompanied GW, her husband, and a veterinary surgeon when a visit was made to Pachita on the outskirts of Mexico City. After several days, we did manage to see her for diagnosis. This diagnosis was something else. Each of us, upon prior instruction, presented at Pachita's home a fresh egg to be used diagnostically. One by one, patients filed rapidly into the treatment room for their diagnoses. When our turn arrived, Pachita took GW's egg and rapidly rolled it over the patient's head, back, and abdomen before announcing via interpreter that it was cancer of the uterus and then throwing the egg abruptly into an adjacent bucket. Note, at prior surgery, there was cancer invading the uterus, which had not been removed. Some of the eggs previously thrown lay burst upon the concrete floor. Pachita then put her hands into a bowl of water, sprinkled GW with some of it, and blessed her. Surgery was scheduled for the following evening. This time there were fewer patients, and Pachita had several assistants, one of whom accepted contributions. GW was put to bed in the family bedroom, fully clothed, and given tea to drink. Later, three strong young men came and carried her prone to the treatment room together with a roll of cotton and a bottle of ethyl alcohol which we'd previously obtained. I accompanied the party. What's up, Ralph? Pachita sat before the sanctuary artifacts in very dim candlelight as GW was laid on the bed and her abdomen made bare. I stood at her feet. In fact, I held her feet and monitored the pedal arterial pulses. Pachita splashed alcohol on the abdomen, rapidly massaged the flesh, and appeared to insert both a knife and scissors deep into the abdomen with great rapidity and reckless disregard of anatomical structures. GW felt no pain. One heard scissors cutting away, then it was all over, and the assistants rapidly applied a bandage. Pachita sat in apparent prayer, and one seemed to sense a bluish haze enveloping her and her assistants. Locally collected herbs were given to GW to be made into a tea for consumption upon her return home. I changed GW's dressing 3 days later in my office and saw only a few superficial scratches on the abdomen, but I could feel warmth radiating from the entire lower abdomen, as if the area alone were feverish. Her bloody dressing was examined by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and the blood was human, type B, the patient's blood type. Dr. Maxey prefaced his account by saying, seeing is not believing. Seeing together with photographic documentation of the scene is still not believing, and the addition of confirmatory laboratory analysis only confuses further by posing impossibilities which are scarcely ponderable to the scientific mind. Dr. Maxey unquestionably has a brilliant scientific mind. Besides being a practicing general surgeon for over 25 years and qualified by the American Board of Surgery and by fellowship in the American College of Surgeons, he is also a pilot and instrument instructor, as well as an inventor who has built hydraulic operating tables, tissue processing machines, and altimeters. He also holds patents on electronic navigating and landing devices for aircraft. He states that scientific and medical experience should be jealously guarded, for it is a very for it is a very great treasure, but, he adds, these disciplines are not worth a fig when one ponders the imponderables of psychic surgery. Let me caution the reader not to expect clarifications of enigmatic mysteries. If asked, I would advise that conclusions be withheld until an expanded comprehension of the phenomenal world allows a more orderly interpretation. And since the impossibilities described are manifestly so, I feel safe in predicting that a sufficient comprehension will not be seen in my lifetime. Dr. Maxey concluded his article by saying, I believe that academic medicine and science will disbelieve the events I've described. The pertinent question, however, is, are patients healed? Phenomenology aside, is there hope to be found for patients with academic medicine? Which academic medicine declares hopeless? I know not, but I do feel the psychic surgeons may help those of us in academic medicine in our striving to perceive the whole cow. On the 15th of March 1972, I received a letter from Dr. Maxey stating that GW, our patient, is currently doing beautifully. On the 10th of September 1973, however, another letter from him said GW is doing poorly, though she was temporarily improved. She's now in New York receiving high energy magnetic 5,000 GANs therapy. She died in the summer of 1974. Why wasn't GW healed? Stanley Krippner and Alberto Veloto, who discuss and analyze Pachita's work in their book, The Realms of Healing, state on page 262 that the patient's worldview may have something to do with it. The discrepancy between the reality of the healer and the patient may be one reason why tourists who show an initial improvement following psychic intervention by Donna Pachita or the Filipino spiritualists sometimes regress when they return to their homes. Their temporary acceptance of the healer's belief system falls apart under scrutiny by their relatives and neighbors, and so do the benefits they attained. That, in essence, was the explanation I myself formulated as I saw numerous patients undergo treatment and operations with little, if any, permanent healing. The person who did not experience healing was lacking in faith. When I asked Hermanito about it, he confirmed that, but said that also sometimes it simply wasn't God's will for that person. Hermanito would often promise a cure or great improvement in a person's condition, knowing it would not be granted, but seeking nonetheless to give the person hope. These medical doctors, he once exclaimed in disgust, they think they know it all. They think they're God. Who are they to say a person's case is hopeless? Perhaps it may be God's will to grant a special miracle if the person keeps hope. Then Hermanito's voice lowered and he looked away from me. It is horrible to die and worse to live without hope. David was another terminally diseased patient who was given a burst of hope by Hermanito. David and I had known each other as children. Our families had been close, especially during the years Mom and Dad had lived in Mexico City. They still kept in touch from time to time, but I had not seen David for many years. David had developed cancer sometime during his sophomore year in college. For almost 2 years, he had undergone chemotherapy and cobalt treatments in a desperate effort to stem the disease. But now huge tumors were growing all through his body. The doctors gave him only a few months to live. When, through a mutual friend, Mother heard of David's latest prognosis, she immediately called his mother to tell her of Pachita. At first, Cora was reluctant to take her son to see the old woman of whom Mamma spoke so highly, but they had exhausted every other possibility. There was nowhere else to go. I went into the room with David and stood by him as Hermanito briskly rubbed the egg over his body and felt several of the tumors. One was on the side of his neck and was almost the size of my fist. Hermanito blessed David with the balsam and then placed both hands on his shoulders. My son, the doctors have told you you have cancer. The doctors have misdiagnosed. What you have is accumulations of fat which have grown to disproportionate size in your body. It is nothing that will kill you, little one. Take courage. David looked up in disbelief as Hermanito prescribed a treatment for him consisting of herbal teas and how's that word? Mamporo? A kind of snake which Pachita dried, ground up, then packaged in large gelatin capsules. Hermanito had said nothing about an operation, which I thought unusual, but I was certain David would have one eventually and would be cured. We were both elated. We rushed outside when Mom and Cora were waiting and gave them the wonderful news. But the treatment didn't seem to help. In fact, David's condition began to deteriorate. His pain was becoming so unbearable that even morphine shots no longer seemed to ease it. His spirits, which had been so lifted and encouraged by Hermanito's words, now fell. He began speaking desperately of suicide to put an end to the agony. I was at Pachita's on the morning of the 29th of February, 1971, when David's father, Andrew, arrived. Johanna, I'm so glad you are here, he exclaimed, taking my hands. I have David in the car. He is not well, Johanna. His pain is unbearable. He says if Hermanito doesn't operate on him now, he will kill himself. There were tears in his eyes as he spoke. Wait here, Andrew. I'll get Pachita. Pachita leaned into the car to talk to David, who lay doubled up in the back seat. Her face was troubled as she and I stepped inside the courtyard to talk. Pachita, will Hermanito operate on him now? You see how he is. Joanna, I don't know, Pachita answered. The boy's cancer is too far advanced. I do not think he would survive an operation now. Cancer? But Pachita, Hermanito said it was not cancer. Pachita shook her head. It is cancer. Hermanito knew no treatment would work for the boy at all if he had no hope. Who knows but God would grant a miracle? But he's too far gone now. What if he should die while he's here? Pachita, Hermanito must operate. David can no longer stand the pain. Please, will you ask him? Very well, we will ask him, she said, shaking her head doubtfully. Come. We went into the altar room. Hermanito arrived minutes later. We will operate on the boy, he said slowly after several moments of silence. It will be in God's hands to save him, if it is his will. Hermanito turned to me. For 3 days you must do the following for him in preparation. Hermanito's voice became brisk. Find rotten mud by a stagnant stream. Heat it, then rub it over the tumor under his ribs. Bandage it and leave it on as long as he can stand it, several hours at least, and preferably overnight. This will help concentrate the virus so it can be removed. In the morning, rub his chest and back and tumors on his neck with this sweet smelling balsam mixed with Chinese cabbage. He gave me the name of a certain ointment. He paused for a moment and then took my hand. It may be, little one, that you will be instrumental in his healing. Again, I tell you, you have a gift. You will heal somebody. You will heal someday, even as my flesh does. Take this bottle of balsam. At night, when the family is asleep, go into each room of the house and sprinkle it around you as you invoke the name of God. If his parents' door is closed, sprinkle water on it. Then take a glass of pure water. Go out to the balcony, raise it high in your right hand, and say, May the most precious blood of our Lord Jesus Christ, which when only represented in Egypt, brought freedom to the Israelites by the strong arm of God, free us and favor us against all evil. Amen. Then recite the Lord's Prayer. Put the glass on the floor. You will keep it there all night. Then lift both hands high above you in supplication and say, Father, my Lord, in this instant I ask you to bless these hands which you have given me. They are empty now, Lord, but by your great love, enable and fill them with charity to remove from this body every trace of illness. By your divine goodness, I give you thanks, great Lord. Light and light, sun and earth, moon and stars, plants and mosses, reptiles of the earth, seas and rivers, women and tribes from all the confines of the earth, in conjunction and harmony, I ask of you this day the health of this patient. Then again, repeat the Lord's Prayer. David is to drink the water you left out in the elements first thing in the morning. Have you understood all I have said to you, little one? Yes, Hermanito, I have. Then go with God and plead with him for the boy's life. We took David home and put him to bed while his father and I drove to the outskirts of the city, where we found a large stagnant pool of water that had once been part of the Aztec canal system. We filled a large bucket with the stinking mud. I had David stretch out on a towel as I heated the mud. Little white maggots collected on the surface of the slime. I lifted out all the ones I could find with a spoon and then applied the mud to David's abdomen. He submitted quietly to the horror, knowing that Ermenito had promised an operation. Only 5 operations were scheduled for the night of March 2nd. David's was to be the last. Mama and Daddy, David's father, and a friend of the family gathered in the room. Chalio and I were assisting. We spread the sheet David's father had brought and had him stretch out upon it. Chalio helped him unbutton his shirt. Ermenito looked down at him. Don't worry, my son. Everything will be as God ordains. I handed Ermenito a block of cotton soaked in alcohol, which he rubbed briskly over David's abdomen. Then he placed 4 cotton pieces around the area to be operated on the right side of the chest below the ribs. He took the scissors I handed him. From a circle around him, dearest brothers, hold hands and pray. Pray with all your strength that God grant us this boy's healing. He raised the scissors in prayer for a long moment, then plunged them into David's side. He cut for a few moments, then asked, Do you feel pain, little one? David didn't answer. The tension suddenly increased in the room. Ermenito pulled the scissors out and looked at David's face. He looked as though he were dead. I could no longer feel his chest rising or falling. Ermenito's breath drew in sharply as he grabbed Chalio's arm. Roll up your sleeve. We must perform a transfusion. Hurry. The rest of you pray. He ordered. Hermanito grabbed Chalio's bare arm and ran his index finger down the skin, which opened and began bleeding. Instantly, he did the same to David and held the 2 arms together for about 30 seconds. I could hear Hermanito's voice murmuring what seemed to be a prayer, but in a foreign tongue, as his tightly shut eyes stared at David's face. Then suddenly David took a deep breath and opened his eyes. There, there, said Hermanito very softly. To my God be thanks. You have Yaqui blood in you now, my son. We may continue. He took the knife and cut out a large tumor, which he wrapped in sheets of dark paper. His hand rested on David's wound for several seconds, after which he swept away the blood-soaked cotton and covered the area with a clean pad. We have finished, dearest brothers. Bandage him now and take him out to rest. Chalio, Andrew, and Daddy helped carry David out of the room. Everyone else followed to see after him. I was alone in the room with Ermenito, who stood by the altar. Suddenly he covered his face and began sobbing. They were tears of fear mingled with relief. Ermenito, what is the matter? I asked, my heart breaking at the depth of his sobs. Oh, my little one, I am becoming such a coward. David had died on the table that night. The force by Ermenito had brought him back to life, but the call had been too close. And that's the end of chapter 11. Next time it will be Pachita. All right, bros, that's all.